Hello and welcome back to Rev Real Estate School. I'm your host, Michael Montgomery, and today we're joined by a repeat guest, Rebecca Higgs. Now, Rebecca has been on the show before. She's back by popular demand because Rebecca is one of these agents that has built her business in such a scalable but also personable way. And not only that, she is one of the top 100 agents in one of the most competitive real estate markets in North America, in Toronto. And how many agents are in Toronto right now, Rebecca?
There's just shy of, for Toronto, there's just shy of 25,000.
And then in the greater area?
I think it was around 76,000, yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah, and just the competition in the Toronto market, very similar, I would say, in many ways to San Francisco, New York. There's a lot of parallels between those three markets, just given how competitive it is. And on today's chat, we wanted to dive into what is happening in the current market and how we are starting to think through being real estate agents in tougher markets. Yeah. So, Rebecca, I mean, first off, let's jump into where you're at and where things are at currently in the market for you.
Well, I've already started seeing a shift this year in particular. You know, normally I always try and navigate the first couple of weeks of January just to see where things are going to go. I think with the forecasts and predictions that have been announced that, you know, interest rates will be coming down. I think it's, you know, we were just talking about fear and panic kind of driving the market. I've started to see a real acceleration and more confidence in the marketplace and investing into it. So what I've seen now is very different to what it was like 3-4 weeks ago, which I think is very positive. But again, it's kind of like switched on a dime, and then everybody's like kind of catching their breath thinking, oh, okay, are we going back into those busy times again, which we are in terms of number of offers that I'm seeing on properties, but we still have the interest rates being higher. And it's also the terms of an offer that are equally as important as the price right now.
Yeah, totally true. And a lot of markets are starting to see this shift. And of course, inventory tends to be the main driver of these multiple offers starting to come back, even though buyer demand has shrunk almost across the board. Just the sheer lack of inventory is still creating these very challenging circumstances for buyers. But how are you navigating? And let's even maybe start to think through 2023, because in some people's market, 2024 might be even more challenging than 2023. And I know 2023 in your market definitely did see a drop. And that's probably the first time in like a decade that there was actually a drop in Toronto. And how did you start to navigate those waters when the real estate world wasn't the same as it was the years previous?
Yeah, 2023 was a challenging year. I think what made it really every deal I did was hard piecing it together, both with buyers, with sellers, with expectations of everybody across the board. No deal. I think there was actually one transaction that was easy. A colleague of mine was unable to show a property. I ended up showing it. We got a deal done within a couple of hours. That was my one easy deal of last year. But every other one, it was a struggle, and there was a lot of back and forth. You know, the market shifted very quickly, and then we kept having interest rate announcements coming, and everybody was holding their breath, waiting, you know, to see, was it going to go down? Was it going to stay the same? I think a big thing was because there was such a lack of confidence with sellers about selling at that moment in time, a lot of people didn't sell. I think one of the positive things is we still have people that can see it as an opportunity. And I think a lot of people, if they were buying and selling in the same market, did see it as an opportunity. I think what actually kept Toronto relatively okay when you look at across the world and the impact that the interest rates have had there in those markets, I think we were relatively stable because we still had buyers using it as a time of getting into the market, riding out the interest rates for the next, 1 to 2 years. And I said to my buyers, guys, this is the time to get into it, right? Before back in 2022, January and February, the rates were low, prices were high. Now, when the rates have started coming up, now values have come down. My personal opinion was, and professional opinion was, if you can get into a house that's priced lower, rates are higher, the moment they start coming down, values will start going up. That's the winning combination to me. And that's what I did in 2009. We had that 6-month blip, and I ended up buying at that time. And everybody was like, you're crazy. The market's going to come further. Well, nobody knows where the bottom is. But I knew that I was already getting into something that I wasn't able to afford 6 months prior than that. And that property, I talk about my success in real estate has been, I was 24 years old, putting $15,000 down as a down payment, 5%, because that's all I had. And those stepping stones has led me to where I am now. And it was all building on the equity. So I think it's the narrative, it's the mindset of how we look at these viewpoints. But yeah, 2023 was tough, but it really did show, I think, who could handle it and toughen out those types of markets. You had to be resilient, positive. You had to navigate conversations with clients that I've never had to really have before, especially sellers, and tough conversations. And before, when it's easy, right? Like, 2021, 2022 was relatively easy for most agents. And well, most if you were heavy on the listing side. But I think last year was a year that really showed if you can get through last year and still do relatively well, I think you're destined for success in this business. There was an agent
that's actually it's a really good point, right? And like this business is not 2020 to 2022. Like that period in time that we all experienced where we'd put a listing on it, would sell in a day. Like that's not real estate when you look at it in a long-term horizon of over 25 years. And I think during this chat, we definitely are going to get into how we're talking to sellers right now, how we're talking to buyers, how we're dealing with the fear in the market of the buyer saying, isn't the market going to drop even more? But maybe right before we jump into that, let's jump into the mindset of a real estate agent right now. And specifically, let's talk a little bit about fear that real estate agents have. And I've heard it a million times, and it continues to be kind of the main concept is the market is slowing down. I'm not going to make enough money. I don't have enough leads in my pipeline. I don't know what to do. I'm not busy enough. How would you start to coach an agent starting to have those thoughts as they're coming into 2024?
I would say it's very much like what we talked about on the first podcast. I think follow up, getting in front of people, having coffees, having conversations. Unfortunately, it's the same thing that I said previously. The media doesn't help us sometimes. And, boots on the ground, what I'm experiencing is not relative to what I'm reading. And I think that's very hard because if people are absorbing all this negative information and it really isn't as doom and gloom. I mean, I feel right now, everybody is 2 weeks behind where the market is right now. And I'm already starting to see more confidence and positivity. Buyers and sellers still have the mindset of what it was like a month ago. So it's a mindset to me is one of the most key components of real estate in general. And I think it is just following up with people, just getting out there, going to the open houses, or doing as many open houses as you can, meeting people, sending them listings before they get it. See it on House Sigma or whatever platforms that they're using. I think it just has to go back to what we talked about before. It's basic, the human touch and being positive within yourself. I think I said I had an agent who came into my office last year and he's heavy on listing side and he was very depressing to be around. And he came in and he was like, oh, this is going to be a terrible year. And and I just said, I can't, you need to leave. And I did it in a jokey way, but I did kick him out of my office. Then I looked at my assistant. I said, I want a sign put up. And so now I have a sign, positive vibes only. I have no interest in having negativity. And because that translates to me, and then I start getting panicked. And if we as agents don't think that truly goes into our clients, then we'd be silly to think that it didn't, right? I mean, I just feel that we have to be the voice of reason. And yes, these conversations that we're having with sellers and buyers, if we're negative, they're going to feel that negativity, and then it just creates more fear and panic.
Totally. And you know how often it is that like you're competing for a listing and you go in there and you're very enthusiastic about the listing, and regardless of the market conditions, you're very enthusiastic about the seller and about their home, and you'll hear from them. Like, we interviewed 3 agents and we just love how you're so positive, upbeat. You love our property. We understand that there's challenges in the market, but they feed off of that. Right. And then if you're coming in there doom and gloom, but there's this, I guess, conversation that's going through my head right now is how do we balance expectations with positivity? Because if I walk into there and be like, it's beautiful, it's going to sell instantly, we also want to we also want to have them understand the expectations of what days on market tends to look like. So how do you navigate that conversation?
So I like to always be positive about the house, but I'm absolutely not one to be like, this is going to sell quickly. At the end of the day, I always say we don't have a crystal ball. The houses last year that had limitations were the ones that struggled the most. Good properties were still moving quickly. I think, again, I'll go back to what we talked about before with listings. It's timing, presentation, and strategy. And where I kind of always positioned myself last year when I was talking to sellers was, you know, timing, presentation, strategy. The timing is wonky right now, and it's going to be for a while, which means that I have to knock the presentation and the strategy out of the park for people to overlook the timing. And that really helped me, because sometimes the conversations of let's paint and let's do the kitchen cabinets and let's do change the door handles, you could be challenged. And some people didn't want to do those things. I think once I positioned it that way and saying we aren't in the market that we were in back in 2022, it's not to say it won't sell. It's just going to take longer than it normally does. I was still doing offer dates last year. So I always would say, you know, we'll do plan A. Plan A is we're going to suppress the price, put it on for a week. Let's see what happens. If we don't get what we're looking for, or we don't get any offers, then we go to plan B, which is the you price to negotiate down. And I always said, if I go to plan B, it's not that we failed or I failed. It's just the market didn't support that strategy. But you can't go from B to A. So those were really the conversations. I mean, I had an offered presentation date yesterday. We didn't get anything. And the whole time leading up, I said, I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll do this. And we haven't failed. And, you know, we're just going to the plan B right now. One person last year said to me, well, what about plan C? I said, there is no plan C. We've only got the two plans. But
we got two plans.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing. And so it's, you know, being excited about the listing. Everybody loves their home. They're emotionally attached to it. So I don't want to be like, oh my God, this is going to take months to sell, because I don't know. And just as much as we saw the market switch, I'm now seeing it switch back, which then is going to create fear and panic with agents of, oh my God, they're going to feel that they're in a similar market to 2022. I mean, we're seeing 18 offers on a property. An agent in my office had 22 offers. And then agents have started panicking about that. Am I going to be able to find my buyer a property? So it's such a shame, because we're never going to really work in a stable market, right? It's either a seller's market or a buyer's market, and it can flip very quickly. So yeah, I think it's positioning, it's managing expectations.
You're bringing up and what I like about that, like generally when I'm with a seller, what I want to break down is what do we control in here, and what do we not control? And what do we not control? We do not control the market, and we do not control the competition that comes on. We have to work within those bounds. What can we control when it comes to this potential outcome that you're looking for? And strategy, presentation, really, really big part of it. I have a couple of follow-up questions though. And one that, you know, it's probably probably makes its way into other markets more than it does an extremely busy market like yours. But what do you do when a seller says, okay, you want to suppress the price to say $9.99 instead of listing it at 1.1.
Yeah.
And a seller says, well, I'm really concerned about putting that price out on MLS, that $9.99, because I'm not selling this thing for a dime less than 1.1.
Yeah.
How do you actually help them understand the value of a suppressed price approach?
So that's a great question. I was relatively really aggressive last year with some of my pricing. And the reason being is I needed the numbers in order to, I mean, if it was a 1-1 house, I probably would have done $8.99, to be honest with you. And I would say to them, listen, bring me $1, bring me $500, bring me $9.99, bring me $8.99. No, we're not going to sell it for that, but we need to get the numbers up so that I'm able to achieve kind of within the range that we needed, or that we wanted. Last year in particular, I'll be honest with you. I mean, we did a property, we listed it, we were hoping for 800. I listed it at 699. I had 6 offers. 5 of them were all low 700s. And then I had the outlier that was at 8, and then we were able to get them up 20,000 more. So they kind of outbid themselves. You know, if I didn't have those other 5, I wouldn't have been able to achieve that 820. So I would actually give the way of, for me, especially when I'm with clients, is giving them the data points of what I've been able to achieve, based on doing the certain strategies of what I'm suggesting. And say, especially last year, there were so many people that oh, the market's so doom and gloom. Okay, well, yes, I know the value's 800, which it was. I'm going to go in at 699 or 700. Well, they never really had a chance of getting it, but they would like, oh, let me take it off your hands. But I needed those people in order to do it. If I'd done 799, I know I wouldn't have got the number that we ended up getting for it. So I think for me, giving my experience of what I was seeing kind of put people at ease. And also at the same time, if we don't get what we're looking for, then we go to the plan B option and then we just price to negotiate down.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's walk through your strategy with that. How long do you tend to put a property on the market before you change to plan B? Or I guess how long do you put it on before you do your offer presentation date?
So normally I like putting properties on the market on Tuesday. Just Tuesdays for me have always been good. Good luck. And then I look at offers the following Monday.
Okay, so you get about a week on market.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, how do you approach a seller that then receives a preemptive or bully offer, and how do you walk through that conversation with them?
So we didn't really see a lot of preemptive offers last year. And I think that's because of where the market was at that moment in time. I've had conversations. I mean, if it's going to be a preemptive offer, it has to be a number that we don't think we're going to achieve on the offer date. So it has to be overvalue in order for us to entertain that. With that being said, I've got a property right now that we uploaded a few days ago. I have had a few agents call me about a preemptive offer, which again goes to show the psyche of where things are at right now. We haven't had a lot of showings on this property. Now, they don't know that. And I hope this podcast is released way after I've sold these ones.
We'll delay it for a few days.
Yeah, that would be great. And we haven't had a lot of showings. So I'm kind of the mindset that if they kind of do come and bring me a price that is in line with what our expectations are, would I probably entertain it? I probably would. But that, again, is just given, you have to navigate accordingly. And you've got to look at, are we getting the number of showings? We also are getting more listings hitting the market. So I have to be strategic in, is it worth waiting? What if they find something else? So I think right now there's no one size fits all, right? Every property is different. Every building is different. And how we have to navigate the waters, it's looking at, well, how many showings? What has the feedback been? Is it worth getting this into a preemptive offer and selling it beforehand? Or if they end up waiting for the offer date and they're the only offer, then they may not be willing to, pay the number that we're looking for right now. So I think there's a lot that you have to think about with each type of scenario, and no two scenarios are the same.
Yeah, and no two people are the same too. Like, because sometimes the way that I look at these and preemptive offers, if it's a different language that's used in your market, basically Rebecca's setting an offer date for Monday, and she's receiving an offer, say, the Friday before, and Rebecca and the seller has to decide by end of night Friday. So there's a number of different terms for that bully offer, preemptive. But so let's say that offer comes in, like sometimes you have a very risk adverse seller and maybe it's still below where you see the value of the property, but you then have this difficult conversation with a seller, right? And so how do you approach a conversation with a seller when this preemptive comes in and you have to balance risk and reward? And you also, I know you because you're an extremely good agent and very, very good at communication. How do you communicate to the seller? Do we take this? Do we not take this? Or do they usually look to you and say, Rebecca, you've done this a million times. What would you do? What tends to happen there?
So let's say I listed a property on a Tuesday. We received a preemptive offer on a Friday. Well, first of all, it has to be a firm offer, so no conditions. Second of all, a bank draft. So if they have those things, then I know that they're serious about the property. Assuming that I can get enough of time on the irrevocable, hopefully I have 4 or 5 hours. I can then, I always do feedback the day after each showing. So I would have known from Tuesday to Friday what the feedback has been. And if there's anybody else potentially interested for me to then follow up with, I'm just going to keep putting that word out there. That I can follow up with and say, look, we do have something. Are your clients still interested? If we have showings that are scheduled for the weekend, again, it depends how many showings there are. If there's 6 or 7, then I have to explain to my sellers, do we want to wait for those people to go through? I can also call the agents and say, look, we have a preemptive offer. Would you be able to go through tonight? So I think it's navigating all of that before you even have a conversation with the seller to say, look, everybody who's shown it from Tuesday to Friday, nobody else seems to be of interest. I have spoken to the people that have scheduled it for the weekends. A few of them said yes, they're, they like the look of the property, but they're at the beginning stages of looking. So I'm not too, hell bent on, waiting for those people. So I think you have to navigate the waters depending on what you have in front of you to really give the best advice. I do find, again, when you meet with somebody and you build rapport and trust with them, they really should be coming to you for advice. At the end of the day, all I can do is give you my advice. What you choose to do with that is completely up to you. If there's a lot of positive feedback, I would say, look, I just feel let's wait and see if we get something more on the Monday. I haven't really got anybody else waiting in the wings, another one person or another two. Then I'd probably be inclined to say, why don't we try and work with this? And, with a preemptive offer, you don't have to take what they're giving you. You could always do a sign back. You've got nothing to lose by that. And say, okay, if we are going to sell it tonight, what's the price that you're looking for in order to get this done?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess where my mind's going and thinking, putting myself in your shoes, what if our advice is to wait and then offer night comes along and we get nothing and the preemptive offer is no longer interested. They went and bought something else.
Yeah.
How, I guess, do you prepare a seller for that? Because that is a potential outcome of not taking a preemptive, right? Mm-hmm. That is a potential outcome. So how do you prepare a seller for that outcome? Even if you're quite confident you're going to see something, but sometimes things happen. How do you go through that conversation?
I think it's just having that. I mean, at the end of the day, if you've got a preemptive offer, this is a guaranteed sale. Right. And yes, we can wait for the Monday, but I can't make any promises to you. I think ultimately they have to be the ones making the decision so it doesn't fall on your conscience. For me, I wouldn't sleep for weeks if that was the case. I did once have a agent. Now, this was back in the strong market of 2022. He sent a preemptive offer and he was really tough on me because we didn't take it. And he called me every name under the sun. Now, first of all, I had to take that abuse because I wanted him to come back, which there was some colourful language I actually would have probably wanted to say to him, but I had to navigate that. At the end of the day, you can't take things personally. Did I take it personally? Yes. Was his approach wrong? Absolutely. But I also had to keep him at bay because he may have been the top one. That was, the following the next week. But I made it very clear to the agent, my client made the decision. They're the ones that have instructed me that they don't want to be working with this offer. But for those 3 nights, I did not sleep because I was like, should I have had taken it? And will he come back? He did come back and I ended up getting $80,000 more on that offer.
That's why he called you everything under the sun, is because he knew his client was willing to go up beyond that.
No, he wasn't the one. He wasn't the winning one. My God, I wanted to.
Oh.
Yeah, he wasn't the winning one. He was very angry that I wasn't taking it. And I said, look, this bully mentality, it's the same thing. Like, I don't see agent as a competition. At the end of the day, your client has emotions. My client has emotions. We smarter heads have to prevail. We are both agents representing our best interests of our clients, but we've got to work collectively together. Being aggressive and rude and bullyish, which I hate the word bully offers because I actually think you can't bully somebody into making a decision. It's a preemptive offer, but my clients were not comfortable taking it. And it was a good number, but we were getting lots of positive feedback. We had lots of showings scheduled for the weekend. So when the offer date did come and I ended up selling it 80,000 more, I really wanted to call the agent to be like, I told you so. But at the same time, I don't know when I'm going to cross paths with him again. And
I think you're bringing up a really good point here, and one that is, there's not enough emphasis put on this in the real estate industry. I feel like in the real estate industry, we're always taught to not network and not talk with other agents because they can't bring us leads and can't bring us any sort of potential income. There's a huge argument to be made that the relationships that you have in your market are going to make or break when you're at an offer table like that. And I see a name that I trust and I recognize, and frankly, when I'm bringing multiple offers to a seller, one of the columns in my spreadsheet that I have in there is how communicative the agent is, like the strength of the agent based on my interpretation so far. And I added that line in, this was a couple of years ago, and holy smokes, do sellers care about that? I didn't think they'd really care. I just did this because I wanted to remember, hey, this agent was not very communicative. I'm not overly trusting of this agent. So I started to just put that in. Then I shared it with the sellers and they were like, well, that's a lower offer, but this agent seems very strong, works with good buyers, great communication. They take it. And so the power of this relationship that you build with people, and even though you want to say things, you refrain from saying them because it's for the best interest of the client. It's truly what it is, even though you sit there and take the beating.
So I say this to clients all the time. It's very important I build good relationships with clients, right? Obviously, that is the foundation of my business and everything. It is more important to me, the relationships I build with agents. The relationship with agents is absolutely more important because they're either going to work with you or they're not going to work with you. And there are, unfortunately, again, it's the bully mentality of agents, or not always agents, but just this fighting mentality of like, well, I want this, and it's not about what you want or whatever. Your clients have a certain expectation. My clients have a certain expectation. How can we work together to do it in a really nice, calm manner? It's one of the things. Reputation in this industry is so important, and it starts with agents. I met with a new client a couple of weeks ago, and the listing agent is somebody I've done a few deals with. And I ended up saying to my client, look, I know this agent very well. I can really kind of find out kind of what their expectations are, what the feedback is. When I was walking out from doing the showing, I was locking up, and this listing agent showed up. And I said, oh, it's so lovely to see you. And I gave him a big hug. And he looked at my client. He said, you've got one of the best agents in this city working with you. And there was so much mutual respect. Like he's built an incredible brand for himself. And that makes my clients feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that is so important. An agent, I'm doing an offer later today, and I was talking to the agent last night, and he was like, oh, you know that we've spoken before? And I was like, no. He said, well, I remember your accent. I said, oh, I can't get away from my accent. I said, I hope I was nice to you. And he was like, yeah, it was a property, and you were very candid with me because it was a multiple offer situation, and he was one of the bottom. And he said, I really respected the fact that you called me straight away saying, listen, I'm not going to drag this out until midnight for you, just waiting to see if you've got it. You're at the bottom, probably won't be able to get to the range that we're at. And I let them go, which also gives peace of mind to the prospective buyers, that they're not anxiously waiting till midnight. He said that he started doing it in his business practice now, that he always goes to the bottom first, lets them go, and then he'll, approach the agents at the top, which I also think is a good strategy, because for me, if you get rid of the bottom people, that just has the top people anxiously waiting.
Yeah.
Where I think most agents go to the top first, and then will, at midnight be like, oh, I'm sorry to the bottom people, you didn't get it. But if you do it the other way around, first of all, the agents at the bottom respect that. They can let their clients know they can enjoy their evenings. And the agents at the top are the ones kind of anxiously waiting, thinking, well, hang on a sec. And then their clients are, okay, well, maybe we'll throw an extra 20, maybe we'll throw an extra 30. So I think there's so much psychology as well to kind of doing that approach. But I was really happy that he remembered positive things. I don't know if we're going to get the offer tonight, but I think
that pays off. It pays off. And actually your strategy's a good one. One approach that we'll tend to take too is, if you're going to counter a party, like let's say that you have 3 offers, we'll tend to counter the second highest versus the highest, because if you counter the highest, and let's say that counter frustrates them and then they pull back their offer, it's a low percentage of chance that happens, but it can happen. You frustrate that buyer by countering them, you lose them, and then you only have the second best. So oftentimes what we'll try and do is counter the second highest, try to pull them up, and then from there counter. Now, if they become the first highest, then you counter the previous first highest. And you there's a lot of strategy that goes into these multiple offer situations that goes on behind the hood. And honestly, a lot of this comes down to your ability to connect and collaborate with other agents. I wish more agents, and I think more agents are starting to move in that direction from interactions that I've had. But there's still some agents out there that see negotiation as this win-lose sort of mentality. And in the long run, those agents just lose.
Listen, I don't like losing either. But it comes down to the relationship you build with the agent from the moment. So I always do, from the moment that my client likes the property, I reach out to the agent and at least start building. My client really likes it. I think we may be coming on the offer date. If you get anything preemptively, please let me know. Then the day of the offer date, I'm always the one that registers first. I don't see a benefit, and maybe this will go against the grain of certain agents' opinions. I don't believe that if an offer presentation is at 6, what the benefit is waiting until 5:45. It makes the sellers so anxious. Like, sellers need peace of mind. And so for me, I always say to my clients, I want to be the first person to register 9 o'clock, 9:30. And at least then the sellers know, hey, you know, we're definitely getting an offer. It puts them at ease. Plus it makes me look favorable in their eyes because I was the first one that registered. Yeah. And I think it's just that again, I think it's just setting yourself up for as much success as you can. At the end of the day, if you get blown out of the water because of pricing, there's nothing we can do about that. But everything we can do leading up and the preparation of being the one registering first, have the bank draft, do a cover letter. The cover letters really helped me last year, especially when you're having tough conversations with sellers and saying, you know, we're not going to be getting... I was selling properties for value last year, where before, the years prior to that, I was able to get over and above value. And so I was always navigating with sellers saying, you know, this is exactly in line with what my value of opinion was. Yes, I would have loved to have had got you more than that. But at the end of the day, the most important part of that is the property appraisers.
Yeah.
And lenders right now and appraisals are very risk averse. And so that was also a conversation that I would have to sellers and say, I know you want X for your property, but do you want it to close? Because selling is one thing, closing is another. And if the market changes from now to 60 days, which, you know, if a closing is 60 days and 90 days and they didn't get their financing straight away, 45 days, the market could have gone down further, and that 20% doesn't, you know, equate to what they actually have to put down. So that was another way of managing all of that with clients, with sellers.
And so getting into these conversations with sellers, so you go on the MLS and you see that they bought their home 2 years ago, they paid 1.3 for it, and you know it's going to be tough to get them 900. I don't know if it dropped by that amount. I've heard some horror stories of that. How are you approaching that conversation?
I wasn't really I haven't had many people that did buy the 2 years ago. I mean, those were just tough conversations. And then it's really just seeing, well, what's the objective of them selling now? In an ideal world, they should just hold on to it. Where I feel very sorry for people who bought were the people that bought in January, February 2022. And I don't know if we talked about this previously, but that was the time that I was extremely concerned where the market was. Properties were selling 150 to 200,000 over value. So not over asking. The asking would be 999. The value was 13135. They were selling for 15. And I remember 8 days in a row. And this, I will always remember this. And I've been talking to a lot of buyers about this now. At that time, it was 8 nights in a row. I had 5 different clients and I was losing. And I was outside of agents' offices, agent houses. And I was driving home, didn't see my kids in 8 days. And I remember driving home on the 8th day and just saying, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I cannot have my clients be in this type of scenario. And again, we were in January and February, which seasonality-wise have always been very strong for us. And so it was in February that I called all of my clients. I said, we're not buying now. Let's wait until more inventory hits the market in the spring. Things will adjust, and that's the time. 2 clients nearly fired me for that. One really wanted to put an offer on a property. I said, if you want to do it, that's fine, but you have to call the listing agent or somebody else. I cannot put my name on this because you are not going to like me. And again, that was me trusting my gut and experience of what I've seen for the last number of years.
So was this based on your thoughts that the prices were going to go down?
It wasn't really that the market, 2022 was still a very strong year for us. It was just the demand in January and February was very, very strong. There was still lots of buyers. There was very little inventory. The weather was really good. Seasonality wise, January, February have been the strongest months for us in Toronto because it's almost, again, I go back to the psychology of this and I find this fascinating how it's like new year, new me, I need to buy a house, and people suddenly wake up and just want to quickly get a property, and then they start actively looking. There's not a lot of inventory on, which drives up the selling prices. And then once the properties come on in the spring, which the spring and the fall are busiest times in terms of inventory, then it starts leveling out a bit. And I'd seen the same pattern happen. And it was literally 6 weeks later, a property back in January, February would have sold for 1.5 and we got it for 1.328 or some quirky number, because I like my quirky numbers.
Interesting. So yeah, your assumptions were right. Your feelings around that.
Yeah. So I think it's those people that bought at that time, especially with the interest rates. I mean, if they were variable, my heart breaks because, you don't have probably as much equity, or the property is worth less than what you're paying on a mortgage. Mm-hmm. And that's a scary position to be in. But again, for those people, you've just got to try and ride it out. And again, I've started seeing more confidence now in the marketplace. But inventory, I mean, I read a stat that inventory last year was down. The last time we had the level of inventory was 20 years ago.
That's quite remarkable. And that tends to be kind of the issue across the board. And then agents, from an agent perspective, they're thinking to themselves, well, if inventory is that low, there's just not enough opportunities for me. With a larger growing space of people getting into the real estate industry and inventory being low, they kind of feel like the wind's let out of their sails.
Yeah.
So what would you say maybe to a newer agent who got in the last couple of years and they're like, wow, did I get in at the worst possible time? How would you approach that conversation with them?
I would say actually it's not the worst time. And I experienced this in 2009, right? Where it was like, oh my God, things change and adjust very quickly. I think it's resilience, positivity, realizing that there's a market in every market and having that as a mindset. My biggest advice to anybody in this business, kind of because you've seen two extremes, right? From 2022, it being a seller's market, 2023, more of a buyer's market. If you can go through both markets in 2 years as an agent, well done for you, because now you'll be able to navigate it 20 years, 30 years from now if it happens again. I think the biggest lesson is to have equal number of listings and buyers. I think that's one of the reasons I was able to still survive last year, was a lot of training that I have been told over the years. And my feelings. I love working with buyers. I'd work with 1,000 buyers probably before a seller again. And sorry to any sellers who I've worked with before. But it's a lot more work, and it really, everything I just take so personally. But I really think it's important to focus on both. If you look, even at the top 100 agent list, 80% of those agents are predominantly listing agents, because the mindset was, well, if you have a listing and you do an open house, you can pick up 3, and it's like this stack, right? Of, you want to be dominant because it's almost a guarantee sale. Well, there is now no guarantees. If anything of what any agent has experienced last year, it can be very challenging, and costs associated. I mean, staging a property, before it would be destaged within 2 weeks. I mean, I just sold a property that we had September 29th was the listing date. It's closing February 14th. I've been staging it the whole time, right? So my expenses have gone up significantly because of it. I would say if you focus on both actively working with buyers and sellers and not put a preference over one or the other, yes, buyers can take a little bit more time, but the buyers are what got me through last year, because, I was able to just have those conversations and say, this is the time to get into the market. Yes, your spending power is less, but the prices are less. And once you ride it out for the next 1 or 2 years, you're going to be laughing to the bank, because the equity that you've built is already there, and you don't really have to do anything. You've just got to allow the market to adjust.
Totally agree. I think there's this argument that listings are scalable, right? You can carry 50 listings, but carrying 50 active buyers is another story. But I feel like that's blown out of proportion. Like there's a very small subset of a market where if somebody's carrying 50 listings or would have 50 buyers. I think this diversification.
I would die if I had 50 listings. I would absolutely die. I'd never sleep.
No, I know. And they occupy a different segment in our mind. And most of that segment is anxiety producing, because we don't always have control over whether this thing's going to sell or not. And it keeps us up at night worrying about it. But I do think that there's too much emphasis placed on just build a listing business. And it's not building a listing business. Again, it's not a complete real estate business, because if you think about it, like if you want to extend this to its extreme, if you're just selling properties, but you're not helping people buy, eventually you're not going to have anything to sell because you haven't helped anybody buy. And I think this argument behind just push your business fully in favor of listings is a little misguided.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I've had a lot of people say to me, why do you like working with buyers so much? Well, I love it for the energy, but it's two very different, as you said, mindsets. With a listing, you get that nervous energy of the sellers, right? So you do an offer date and every day well, what's the feedback? Well, what do you think? And you've got to manage that to be like, okay, lots of positivity. Let's not have, let's just trust the process. And so that weighs on you. You're doing more hand holding with the seller, even during that 1 week, than I really feel like I navigate with the buyer who's seen 50 properties. Because with the buyer, it's, using things as discovery phase, right? I have a number of, Christmas Eve, I met with 6 brand new buyer clients of people suddenly being like, you know what, we want to get into the market. And they weren't, 2 of them weren't ready. They'll be ready in the middle of February. And they said, so we'll reach out to you in February and start looking. I said, oh no, we're going to go out the moment that you see a property. Let's go out. Whether or not you're ready to buy right now, I really don't care about, but I want us to use this time wisely so that the areas that you want to be in, that you decide what you're willing to compromise on, what you're not willing, so that when you are actively ready to buy, that we're not then doing that discovery phase at that moment in time. And the first property I show you when you're ready is the right property for you, but you don't know that because you haven't seen the ones that haven't worked for you. So I think, but it's a lot easier for me as a buyer because you're just waiting for that right property after you've done the work with the client for them to really know when the right one is that comes on.
And so where my mind's going with this, amazing process, by the way, the fact that you're moving people into, let's start looking at homes to start to get them prepared and without the intention of writing an offer. Where my mind's going and where agents might be thinking is, how the hell does Rebecca manage her time? If she is advocating for buyers to get out and look at places before they're ready to pull the trigger. I know so many agents that are just like, if you're not ready to pull the trigger, we're not getting into my car and we're not looking at places. I'm firmly against that for a million reasons. We should be getting out early. But how are you managing your time if you have 6 new incoming clients on Christmas Eve, plus your ongoing clients? How are you working through that?
Well, those were conversations that I had with them. Obviously, it was waiting for the properties to come out to see. I also, I've got Alex, who you know very well. She manages my time for me. And we just time it as we have to. What I would say about your comment about the agents that say, well, if you're not ready to buy now, we're not going to go look. Well, then don't be upset when that person goes to an open house and randomly they found the right property and then they buy it with the listing agent, right? at the end of the day, we have to work hard. And a lot of the times when we talked about this in the previous podcast, I do things, I may not be getting paid for a month or 2, or they may actually decide, you know what, we actually want to hold off for another year. But it's all of that actively saying, I know you're not ready right now, but let's use this time wisely. It builds trust, it builds rapport, and you're not then just following up with them 2 months from now and then they say, oh, I'm sorry, but we already bought something.
Such a good point. Yeah, you're basically avoiding that leaky bucket syndrome of people coming in and then going and buying separately. Yeah. But what's interesting is I think sometimes agents make it out in their mind that they're going to go look at properties and they're going to look at 6 properties a week for the next year, and then they're going to buy something. And that's never the case. Like, you might get out with them. Like, if they're looking to buy in a year, maybe you get out with them like 4 times over the course of the year, right? They look at a couple of homes sort of thing. Like, that's not a huge time investment. And we make this, we kind of play this story in our mind that if we go out and show them places too early, that we're going to be showing them places for another 6 months to a year. But that's really rarely the case. When they're getting out multiple times a week, like, what's going through their mind is, do I want to buy this home? It's not, oh, let's just go look at homes.
So I did have one client a couple of years ago, and I had said, so they were going to sell a condo. They weren't ready. I said, let's use this as a discovery phase. I will say this, every Friday night, that was my evening for probably about 8-9 months. I don't know how many houses I saw, 100, but I love them. So for me, I'm like, and I don't see this as work. I said to a new client, one of the clients that I interviewed with on Christmas Eve, I don't feel that this is work. How lucky am I that I get to just hang out with people? Once we do the negotiating, obviously, then I have to put like the business hat, but I love what I do. And so for me, being around doing it every Friday I loved it. Where I learned from this, and every deal I do, I come away and I'm like, okay, what was positive about this? What was something I need to improve on? When they were actually ready to sell, so we sold first, then we bought. So we sold, we got a very good price for that place. When it became real, When it became real that they were ready to buy, then they were like, oh, okay, well, actually, yes, we like those houses at 1.5, but we're not actually comfortable about spending that 1.5. And it was one of the lessons I learned from that, of having those conversations, saying, I am more than happy to, let's use this time wisely as discovery, so that when you're ready, you're ready. But I need to make sure that you do all your budgeting beforehand, so that you know where you're comfortable to draw the line. Because unfortunately, where a mistake I made of that was their budget then became 1.3. Well, they'd looked at houses that were 1.5. And so managing their expectations, they were going to be getting less than what I'd already shown them. And I think it's, again, and now I say that to every buyer, at the end of the day, spending power is one thing. What you're comfortable spending is a whole nother thing. And I need to make sure that I get it right for you, so that when we do see those properties, it's relatively in line with what you're going to be getting, so that you're not disappointed when you are ready.
And it's just like what I'm hearing here is just open, transparent human conversation. You know, you're not like, you're not trying to, you're not using some real fancy scripting and you think that that's going to close the deal. You're just being a good human and helping like hold their hand and walk them through this difficult process. And I think that partially, among other things, what contributes to a great degree of success for real estate agents. Mm-hmm. And when we start to get too deep down with kind of this scripting side of things and how we can decide whether we put somebody in our car or not, and we're, you know, go to our lender before we talk about a home, I think you're just treating them like another, like just a human. And I think that goes so far.
I mean, I think I've learned that. I think that comes with time and confidence, but also people want the human experience in touch. And I think it's the trust, right? If I'm scripted or I'm approaching it in a, you know, the data points are very important, but at the end of the day, the relationship that you have with the client and the agent, that's what gets you over the finish line. And I can, you know, all of these stats, I struggle with stats because unless we're looking in the micro market of where that stat is being presented, I mean, I can manipulate data probably till the cows come home, right? To steer it in the direction that I need it to be. And so sometimes when I do, you know, meet a client and they're very analytical and they've got their spreadsheets and they've got this, it's not an exact science, right? And so I love the clients that come with the Excel spreadsheets. But it's not an exact. And the more that you're focused on, well, prices came down X, so then this property sold at this point, and now, well, hang on a second. What was the condition like? Where was, if it was a condo, what floor was it on? What exposure? There is no two properties alike. And so we can look at data points and it's obviously important, but not everything needs to be on that data point, because at the end of the day, if you throw your hat in the ring and you're not even in the realm and you're just driving up the price, it's only hurting you down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I say this to people all the time too. Real estate is an art and a science. Yeah. And it frustrates certain people that have spreadsheets. It frustrates them to hear that there's an art aspect to this. Yeah. But it's a human transaction too. We're not just transacting purely for financial gain. And even when you are as an investor, there's still a layer of like, I like this property, I don't like this property, that always plays into it, regardless of the market conditions. Mm-hmm. Rebecca, this has been fantastic. This has been so nice, because what we've been able to do here is kind of look at exactly what it is that you talk through with sellers, with buyers, what goes on the mind of an agent who's trying to navigate these waters. So extremely helpful. Thank you for being so open and transparent. Very, very great to have you on again. I'm sure we're going to have you on again soon.
Yeah, it was lovely chatting with you as well.
Absolutely. So how can people best reach out to you?
So I did have a few people before. So I think it really was email. Email was the best way, because I do want to help people during these. Everybody's navigating different waters that they haven't experienced before. But again, I think the mindset's the most positive. If there's one thing I can say, is the follow up in positivity and keeping your mindset. Okay, you know, there's an opportunity for everybody out there, and you know, what is it? Grab the bull by the horns and just keep keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love this concept of follow-up and positivity. I think regardless of the market conditions, there's always challenges. In a really strong market, there's challenges. In a really slow market, there's challenges. We have to remain positive. And then also, I know we were talking about this, we're a little bit off the air, but just that, real estate's our job. It doesn't define our lives and who we are as people, but it's our career. So if we have some ups and downs in this career, that's just part of ups and downs in any career.
Yeah. And don't be afraid of having tough conversations, right? This last year was the time clients needed us the most, just to be transparent and honest about it. And yes, it would be very easy for me to put my head in the sand and be like, oh my God, I didn't achieve what I was hoping to achieve, but the market spoke. And that was, unfortunately, those were the times that I would say to people, yes, we wanted X, but we're within, the realm of what we originally thought. Let's take this and let's, move on to the next property if they were going to sell it or buying or all of those things. So I think that don't be scared of having those tough conversations, because we had to own the challenges that we were all faced with.
Exactly. Amazing place to leave it. We'll put your email in the show notes in case anybody would like to reach out. Thanks again for coming on.
You're so welcome. Take care. Bye, Michael.